You know, nasty little fellows such as yourself always get their comeuppance.
They do?
Oh, yes. Always.
There's a cultural quirk in American football and other major sports that I think takes us very near to the heart of the Donald Trump situation. At the D1 college level, for example, the custom is for both head coaches and sometimes staff and players to individually attend a short press conference after the game, win or lose. Most of what is said at these press conferences falls into the category of coach speak, a babble fest of rehearsed phrases, aphorisms, platitudes, and cliches. For the losing coach, the shield coach speak provides is especially important. Multi-million-dollar contracts rise and fall both on the game itself and the off-the-field media relations bit. So if a reporter asks the losing team's coach, in so many words, why is your quarterback a walking embarrassment, or some other unpleasant question, the coach has a handful of ready-made answers to draw on. You've all heard them a million times. Well, we played a good football team out there today, a prepared football team. It was a team loss. We fought to the end. The players showed effort but came up short. I take full responsibility for what happened out there, and it's back to work this week in practice. The buck stops with me. The players prayed to Jesus, and he sided against us. Oh, hell, why am I telling you this? Here's Kirk Ferentz.
Obviously, today was a disappointing outcome for our players, coaches, fans. We had a great crowd out there. They're really into it. And, ultimately, we didn't play well enough. We didn't coach well enough. As we move forward right now, the biggest thing we have to do is try to eliminate the things that have been holding us back right now. It's a really fine line between winning and losing. Typically, a lot of our issues right now are things that we've got to try to get cleaned up a little bit. The biggest thing is just playing cleaner and more efficient. We've been focused on that. It didn't show up today. Clearly, after today's ball game, everything's up on the board. Everything's open again to discussion. But that's something for us as coaches. We're going to have to find something to get our guys on track. And, that's a coach's thing. That's also a player's thing. We all got to work together, and we will. We'll work together to get this fixed.
For a fan, the drone can be a little irritating. Sometimes in the game of football, the reason for the loss is, yes, a total team failure. Maybe even a team meltdown. At other times, it's the fault of one player making one ill-advised play at the wrong moment, and any jumping John in the stands knows exactly who to point the finger at, no matter what Coach Bubba says in the locker room. But the tradition is still an important one, even in something as cosmically trivial as a football organization. Coaches who want to keep coaching do not blame the players, especially individual players, in front of the cameras very often, even if the coach knows exactly which player is the problem. And there are good management-related reasons for this. It's been said that football is a tough game played by tough men. A head coach, a near supreme authority within a program filled with tough guys, must be seen publicly as taking accountability in the face of failure, not deflecting it to others to spare oneself a share of the criticism. Throw players or fellow coaches, quote, under the bus, to use another time-honored sports cliche, makes you look bad. It sends a signal down the chain that the head man thinks there may be an I in team after all. We have just surpassed the 2-month mark in Donald Trump's dumpster fire of an administration. What made me think of this particular institutional oddity was Trump passing the buck on the death of Ryan Owens, a SEAL from Illinois.
This was a mission that was started before I got here. This was something that was, just they wanted to do. They came to see me. They explained what they wanted to do, the generals, who are very respected. My generals are the most respected that we've had in many decades, I believe. And they lost Ryan.
Did you hear that? They lost Ryan, as in the generals. Not Trump. Oh, heavens no. Not Trump, who signed off on the mission, reportedly over dinner. Not Trump, without which the generals presumably lacked the authority to carry out the mission in the first place. Not Trump, the commander-in-chief, the guy who sought the office and had to know one of the work-related hazards of being president is daily making life-and-death decisions lesser mortals couldn't and wouldn't make. Not exactly Eisenhower, is he? It can't be said often enough. Trump fundamentally cannot and will not take responsibility for anything. Not his promises, his conduct, his missteps and exaggerations, lies, failures and misfortunes, both personal and political. There is always some external source that is the real root of the problem, the real story. Them, out there, the Democrats, who don't have a firm grip on any branch of government, the fake news media, that has committed the sin of reporting facts, real ones, not the alternative facts, which is really the problem, isn't it? The root of the deep psychosis of Donald J. Trump. He simply can't mentally or emotionally deal with the truth, so he makes a new one. Then this week on Monday, we had the first House Intelligence Committee hearing. Buckle up, because they aren't the only committee in town, and the story just keeps getting worse. There sat James Comey, Captain Email, all stiff and calm in his suit, and there under oath in front of all the sober-looking congressmen and women he testified that the FBI is investigating Donald Trump's campaign and their potential collusion with the Russian government. The investigation goes back as far as July, and as of this recording, it is ongoing. God only knows what they found, or will find, or can leverage jail time on someone willing to throw Coach Trump under the bus in order to find. Comey said this on TV, the surest place Trump would find it. And how did Mr. Top of his class at Hogwarts react? What was his cutthroat business CEO mind formulating in the moment as the perfect countermaneuver? What stroke of genius was going to upend stiff-looking FBI Director Comey and his pouchy-eyed uniformed sidekick?
James Clapper and others stated there is no evidence POTUS colluded with Russia. The story is fake news, and everyone knows it. The Democrats made up and pushed the Russian story as an excuse for running a terrible campaign, big advantage in Electoral College, and lost. The real story that Congress, the FBI, and all others should be looking into is the leaking of classified information. Must find leaker now.
Mr. Art of the Deal's keen business mind, in other words, shat blood all over a crime scene. I don't know what's worse, that he deflected responsibility once again, as he has done for everything, apparently his entire life, or that he genuinely seems to believe that tweeting these things, tweeting them, while the hearing is literally still going on, is not going to be seen as an indicator of instability. Because that's what it is. No reasonable person would behave this way in this situation. The director of the fucking FBI is testifying in front of one of the most powerful committees in Congress, saying in so many words, "You're under investigation." And here you are, pecking away with your tiny fingers, blurting conspiracies about fake news into the ether as the FBI is confirming that the news was true and has always been true. Comey isn't sitting there in his best suit all stern and professional because of Democrats. What? Did the Democrats bitch about the Electoral College so much that James Comey actually took time out of his day fighting crime to come and settle it in front of the House Intelligence Committee? It's a little deranged. But is it surprising? We don't think so. This is what it looks like when someone who has never had to take responsibility for anything in his entire life is confronted with the full weight of the law and reality itself, maybe for the first time, and he doesn't know what to do. Any sane person seeing themselves the subject of an FBI investigation knows to do what every gangster in Goodfellas knew to do. Always keep your mouth shut. It would seem that Donald Trump, like all of us, is a prisoner of what he doesn't know. But unlike all of us, he's the president, the leader of the free world. His successes and failures are instantly global news and can have immediate global impact. That's an unfortunate place to be if you're not used to criticism and ownership, and it doesn't bode well for his longevity. If the United States were a major college football program in today's cutthroat, money-bloated game, Donald Trump would be lucky to get through a season before being on the receiving end of his favorite reality TV catchphrase.
You're fired.
The sleep of reason brings forth monsters.
I'm a whiner, and I keep whining and whining until I win.
Maybe somebody will rise up.
We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty.
Welcome to Swing State, an aggressive, progressive, critical, and political podcast from the middle of the Midwest. I'm Dwayne.
I'm AJ.
Welcome back to Swing State. This is episode 13, so if you're superstitious, you may want to skip this one. And if you're not, well, we're going to talk some more about Trump and Russia at town halls in Iowa. So let's get started with this little meeting James Comey had. For those of you who aren't aware, FBI Director James Comey was called to testify in front of Congress, and it was kind of an interesting experience. To start with, he took the unprecedented step of confirming an active investigation into not just Trump, but his entire campaign in connection with Russia.
I have been authorized by the Department of Justice to confirm that the FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. And that includes investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's efforts.
So what we've been talking about here on this show for, we're at episode 13 now, so it's months. We've been talking about this Russia story. What happened in a very subtle, stiff, as I've sort of said in the Broadside, in an FBI kind of way, is we just got confirmation that the world of shit we've been predicting for weeks and months now is basically coming to pass. If you were paying attention to any cable news outlets, the words cloud over the White House seem to be in vogue. And for good reason. Donald Trump has been out there in public saying that the Russia story was fake news made up by Democrats to cover for the shame of their loss. I guess I don't understand. The logic of that escapes me.
Well, part of that is that I think that's sort of projection. I think that
a little
that Trump assumes that because that's what he would do in the same situation. When he was talking about the rigged election before the election, he was basically trying to sort of sandbag things to the beginning, right off the bat. So if he did lose, he already had an out.
Well, sorry, Donnie, you lost by 3 million votes, and you're losing again now. Comey just took you more or less by the scruff of your neck and slammed your face into the table. And it's kind of hard to overstate how bad this could be. I don't want to say for the country, because I think for the country this might actually be a healthy democratic procedure we go through here over the next few months.
Right, and I think we'll also find out what happens in the unprecedented case of a presidential election actually being manipulated by a foreign government.
Or as I was saying earlier, and I just want to make sure that this is a part of the conversation, he's been out there publicly denying that any of his people had connections or contacts with Russia. He's been saying the story is fake news. So that's his side of the story.
Right.
But then Director Comey, the last person you want giving the other side of the story, by the way, especially if they're not the same, now saying that, in fact, there is an investigation. It's not fake news. He had additional news that we'll come to in a moment for Trump that wasn't good. But just to start with, what do you suppose must be going on inside the Trump administration at this moment?
My first thought when asked that question was, well, basically the same chaotic shit that's been going on the entire time. It's just sort of amped up. Because aside from just investigating whether or not there was a Russian connection and Russian interference, he also stated that they were trying to determine whether or not these actions constituted a crime.
Yeah.
As with any counterintelligence investigation, this will also include an assessment of whether any crimes were committed.
It's not just a matter of being like some ethics violation and, oh, shame on you for doing that. Whether or not this is an actual crime that we're talking about, the President of the United States being involved in.
And it's funny in the context of this being James Comey, because back when the email gate thing was still kind of in its early stages, I want to say like last spring, Hillary Clinton had gotten into the habit of referring to the email thing as a security review. And I think at one point James Comey, he either wrote or somehow he said, well, that's not really what the FBI does. In a cryptic way, basically saying the FBI investigates crimes. That's what they do.
Well, this goes back to what you were saying before in the Broadside. He may not mention Trump by name, but it's Trump's campaign.
Yeah.
He is the figurehead. He is the top guy. Yeah, there are people running his campaign, but ultimately this comes down to Trump, which means at the end of the day, the responsibility still comes down to Trump, because his two options are, I know, or, yeah, I fucking did it.
Well,
I told him to do it. Yeah. I mean, what are your options?
Right. I don't know if I exactly phrased it in that language, but Trump, as the head of the campaign organization, whether or not he personally colluded in the end, if that is ever borne out by the evidence, that's almost irrelevant. Because if your entire campaign did, if anybody did for that matter, you're connected to him either way.
Well, and again, to bring it back to what you were talking about before with Emailgate and Hillary, The fucking stain of a bunch of fucking emails was enough to basically sink her. So what happens when we find out that Russia has manipulated our election? I mean, where the fuck are we supposed to go with that? I mean, it's not really laid out in the Constitution. Hey, if you find out that the guy who won used foreign power to rig the election,
yeah,
as he put
he
it.
conspired his campaign, which, I'm sorry, that includes Mike Pence.
Sure.
People who just want to like christen him as like the great white savior in this situation, I want to laugh. I mean, I first of all, I don't believe him. And second of all, does it really matter? If that campaign, if the Trump campaign actually, if there is evidence out there and it's found by the FBI, or they may already have it, if that's borne out, how in the world could you just substitute in somebody else that was with the campaign?
Right. Well, here's the thing I was thinking about with regard to that. If you're at least as ethical as somebody like Richard Nixon, for whatever that's worth.
That's a pretty high bar there, Lloyd.
Yeah. If you're at least that ethical, what you do is you take a look around and you realize, man, this is not going to work for me. I'm going to get screwed. I should probably resign and step the fuck out of the way, so that the government can go through the steps of succession necessary for things to function and maybe get a pardon from my VP.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
Don't even talk to me about that.
I know. But my point is, this is, whether it was calculated or whether it was Nixon actually taking responsibility, he made the decision, I'm going to get out and let our government continue to function. Now, look at the guy in charge now and tell me you think that, one, he would even consider it, and two, that... No, really, that he would even consider it. It's not even a two. I can't imagine a guy who goes out of his way to avoid responsibility for everything he's done could be man enough to say, I don't want to ruin the office of the presidency.
Right.
Okay? I need to step down, and we'll go ahead and let the government do what it does when this type of thing happens.
Well, that's actually a fascinating point. Trump doesn't strike me as the guy who's going to go quietly into the night. Richard Nixon, from my reading or understanding of history, basically he came to the decision when he found out that the House of Representatives and the Senate had the votes to impeach. And so he was like, you know what, I'm going to spare myself this, I'm going to spare the country this, I'm going to step down. And then Ford, right, gave him a pardon later on. Well, yeah, Donald Trump, first of all, this situation is different. We're not talking about a burglary.
Oh yeah, the scale is completely different.
Yeah, like
don't mistake me.
No, absolutely not. I don't think that was your point. But yeah, just as I sit here and think through it, Donald Trump, with the way that he has been acting, which we said, I think it was the last podcast, they're acting like guilty people. They seem to be in the midst of a cover-up. A lot of the Watergate investigators from back in the day are on TV saying, yeah, they're basically in cover-up mode and have been for a long time. It seems to me that they will be caught. There is at least a decent chance that we will see the day where Trump has to make a decision. Am I going to put myself or the country first? I'm not so sure that he will even be able to grasp what's happening to him in a way if it comes to a legal shit show.
Yeah, I'm not convinced he could even come to that dichotomous position that you're talking about. I don't know that it's within him to actually think of the country. You can't look at somebody who's only been in office for 2 fucking months and done the shit he's done and think that he's actually thinking about the country. So I don't even know that he would come to the point, unless it was pointed out directly to him, that he could fall on his sword like the coaches that you talked about in your Broadside and take that one for the team. I don't know that it would even occur to him to do that without somebody pointing it out to him directly. And even if they did, I can't imagine him doing it.
This kind of reminds me also of one of the other conversations we kind of had off mic a little bit about what would you do if the FBI director were sitting in front of the House Intelligence Committee, right? Saying what would you do if Comey was saying that basically you were the subject of an FBI criminal investigation? You would start by shutting the fuck up, but also if you know that you're guilty, which I'm pretty sure. I mean, my feeling is my I don't want to say I assume it, but I have a strong inclination based on the behavior. Trump probably knows he's guilty of something here, that there probably was some kind of collusion. You know, whether or not it's ever proven, it seems that way. And if Trump knows that now today, that option is on the table right now. Donald, you could simply make this a whole lot easier on everybody and not drag the office of the presidency into this terrain needlessly. I don't know that there would be any escape for him necessarily through resignation, but he could definitely spare the country.
Director Comey, was the president's statement that Obama had his wires tapped in Trump Tower a true statement?
With respect to the president's tweets about alleged wiretapping directed at him by the prior administration, I have no information that supports those tweets, and we have looked carefully inside the FBI. The Department of Justice has asked me to share with you that the answer is the same for the Department of Justice and all its components. The department has no information that supports those tweets.
Would it be legal for President Obama to have ordered a wiretap of Donald Trump?
I'm not going to characterize or respond to the tweets themselves. I can tell you in general, there is a statutory framework in the United States under which courts grant permission for electronic surveillance, either in a criminal case or a national security case, based on a showing of probable cause, carefully overseen. It's a rigorous process that involves all three branches of government. So no individual in the United States can direct electronic surveillance of anyone.
So President Obama could not unilaterally order a wiretap of anyone?
No president could.
One of the things that came out during Comey's visit with Congress also had to do with the wiretapping accusations that Trump has been tweeting about. At the end of the day, there is no evidence of wiretapping. Now, obviously, you can't prove a negative, but what we have is there is no evidence, which is as good as it's going to get. There was a piece in the Washington Post, one of the opinion pieces. I'll go ahead and make that clear right off the bat. This is an opinion piece by Jennifer Rubin.
A conservative writer, though.
Yeah, the column is Right Turn. Comey's testimony humiliates Trump. Now, we obviously talked about how basically Trump looks like a dumbass and how potentially he looks like he may be a criminal. But here's the thing that I want to point out that I think Ms. Rubin says more succinctly than I certainly could. Quote, "Perhaps now Republicans can stop treating the president's outbursts seriously. They need to call them what they are. Wild lies and accusations designed to distract from the very real investigation into Russian attempts to throw the election his way." In just a few brief lines, Comey eviscerated whatever credibility Trump still had. Whether the intelligence agency will find evidence of collusion remains to be seen, but what we do know is that Trump will not be able to lie his way through this, nor distract the public. End quote. I think that she's a little optimistic because he will certainly continue to behave that way. He will certainly continue to tweet, and he will certainly continue to make, quote, wild accusations. But I think she's right in the whole that even the Republicans have to just stop pretending at this point. Honestly, what I'd like to see, and I think what really needs to happen, particularly for those of you who are Republican and are listening, if you want to save your party, this is the point where you have to fucking turn on Trump.
Yeah, it's about time. And again, I think we've made this exact point weeks ago, which is which one of these assholes wants to get famous? The only space that does not seem to be filled is the crusading anti-Trump congressman or senator who sees himself being president, who also probably sees that this party and this president, despite their miraculous gains, seem to be in a very weak defensive position on these issues. We were all talking about when the election happened about what would this mean for the country and the Constitution and civil government and democracy. Well, it's amazing to me that in a matter of 2 months, Trump is already mired in congressional investigations.
2 months.
And an FBI investigation, which I have to assume includes the information from other intelligence agencies, both here and abroad. So he's in a web of shit already. And the institutions seem to be holding at this point. And that's a reason for optimism. And then another reason for optimism, Gallup has a poll now where he is at 39% approval and 56% disapproval. That's a swing of negative 17 points. It's one of the most recent ones. It's getting worse. I think, like you said, people are beginning to turn on him. I don't know about his rank and file, because that's a matter of almost informational isolation. I'm not sure that they even know any of this is happening.
The former Trumpansies that were wearing their red hats and talking about how he was going to make America great are going to start flipping on him, because he's actually started to do the things he said he was going to do, and the unintended consequences are they're hurting the very people he was supporting. So that, in combination with the fact that he's just basically been caught lying, repeatedly been caught lying, have to be enough for Republicans to look at him and go, we have to cut him loose. Just for their own selfish sake, if nothing else, to save their party for whatever that's worth.
Senator Brutus and crew are sharpening the daggers by now. The response that he was tweeting as the investigation, or as the hearing, was still going on, there was actually an instance where James Comey was able to live debunk one of his tweets. That is the level of person we're talking about in this situation. And that's something we circle around and we say it a lot, but there are consequences for not knowing what the fuck you're doing.
Right.
And this is a really bad place to be. If you think you're smart but you're actually an idiot, you don't want to be talking to the FBI. You don't want to have them looking at you. This is not good, Donnie.
Donnie, you're out of your element.
Yes, I have reiterated over and over again, he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. And it's become apparent he really doesn't know what he's fucking doing. I don't want to get off on a long side thing, but if you pay any attention to the news, you know Angela Merkel was here recently, met with Trump, and first of all, he treated her like she was subhuman.
I was embarrassed as an American watching that press conference. It was just disgusting.
But if you have the time, you should take a look at his tweets with regard to NATO and what they owe us, as he puts it, as well as all the actual experts' responses tweeting back to him about why he's a fucking idiot and doesn't know what he's talking about.
In addition to that, what you just mentioned there about, him bashing NATO and supporting Russia, that is something that's being investigated by the Congress.
Yes.
That is one of the things that is actually indicating to them that something is very, very wrong here. Donald Trump is still acting friendly towards Russia, even though we know they attacked our election. That is in itself almost a kind of treasonous behavior.
The fact that he hasn't gone out of his way to distance himself from Russia should tell you a lot about what he thinks about what's going on. He doesn't care. He's not concerned, and he doesn't think there are going to be consequences. And I think that's the biggest issue right here, because everything he's already done. But I genuinely think he really doesn't believe there are going to be consequences. You addressed it in the Broadside. We've said it before off mic. I really think it doesn't matter to him. He thinks he's going to get away with this like he gets away with everything else he does. And I'm not even sure he thinks he did anything wrong. I think that's the other part that sort of bothers me, because if you look at his history as a quote businessman and the ethical lapses that he's been involved with over the years that he's run businesses.
That is a very long story there that you're describing,
right,
too. It's not just one or two things.
I don't think he thinks there's anything wrong with what he's doing because it works out for him. As much as I don't want this to be some sort of comeuppance for the 80s movie villain because of the impact it's going to have on the country, I kind of like him finally brought up short for once. To realize that there is harm in what he's doing. I'm not sure if he's aware or if he just doesn't care. I don't know at the end it makes a difference. But he has been fucking toxic for our country, for our electoral process, for our interactions with other nations, including aggressive, potentially enemy nations. He's just been awful for us. And I don't think he cares. And I think he really needs to, this one fucking time.
Irony of ironies, this buffoon is finally ensnared in a very serious legal problem, which he, as we've said a million times, he and his crew are behaving like guilty people as they're being caught up in this. Now that he's there, it's just amazing to see these are the same party, the same people that for months and months were droning on how...
I would just ask everybody this: can this country afford to have a president under investigation by the FBI who can be involved? Think of the trauma that would do to this country.
She's under investigation with the FBI right now. If she gets elected, her first 100 days, instead of setting an agenda, she might be going back and forth between the White House and the courthouse.
What must they be thinking now? Because the stuff that Hillary Clinton was, accused of or supposedly did with her email, which the FBI turned out, the same guy, James Comey, said no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case against this.
When I look at the facts we gathered here, as I said, I see evidence of great carelessness, but I do not see evidence that is sufficient to establish that Secretary Clinton or those with whom she was corresponding both talked about classified information on email and knew when they did it, they were doing something that was against the law. So given that assessment of the facts, my understanding of the law, my conclusion was and remains, no reasonable prosecutor would bring this case. No reasonable prosecutor would bring the second case in 100 years focused on gross negligence.
Now there is a much more serious case that the FBI is looking at, and it's very inconvenient for a lot of Republicans who have given this guy cover.
At this point, I guess I don't need to remind you that innocent until proven guilty and all of the alleged language.
I want to echo that too, because even though there are certain hopes that I have,
sure,
that if the information is true, if it's false, of course, I don't want the guy brought up on false charges,
right.
But if there is substance to this, I think that Donald Trump finally paying for something for once in his coddled life would be fantastic.
Address the vast gap between the rich and the poor in our country.
Will be Sherry Frank from Ely, Iowa. Sherry?
The Healthcare Act, and that is quote unquote act of diversity people. But then I also saw that 24 million people might lose their health insurance on this. Can you clarify his remarks? I fail to see how that's an act of crucifying.
So we need clarification on how many of those are folks that will choose not to engage in health care, those that you can ask many people, both on the left and on the right, and they will tell you that the Affordable Care Act as it is right now is unsustainable.
And my concern is about the cuts in the EPA and the disregard of You approve the cuts in the EPA, and how do you feel about climate change?
Well, we know, I'll address the last one first. We know the climate has been changing for thousands of years.
Given that the U.S. spends more money on defense than the next 7 countries combined, how do you justify an increase in defense spending at the expense and peril of important domestic programs like AmeriCorps, IMLS, the NDA, and others?
I am an educator, and I was appalled at the nomination of Betsy DeVos. Several thousand other Iowans also felt the same way as myself and voiced that through phone calls and emails. So my question to you is, why did you not listen to your constituents? If changes are to be made, it will have to go through Congress. We will hold her accountable.
I just want to say, I'm not being paid to be here. I'm elected to represent the people of Iowa and vote on issues on their behalf. 74% of Iowans support Planned Parenthood, and more Iowans support keeping the ACA intact versus repeal. So how do you sleep at night knowing that you're pursuing a
So as you heard there in the clip, there is a lot going on here in Iowa and around the country. The resistance is showing up here, there, and everywhere to lambast politicians trying to explain that wrecking our healthcare system is going to be to their financial advantage somehow. Beyond that, we have the weekly struggle of doing the show is we seem to find an ocean of shit that we could talk about for an hour each topic every single week, almost every single day. Sometimes it seems since Trump has been on the scene.
Yeah, again, he's only been in office a couple of months, and it has been a daily deluge of shit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think we talked too much in detail about the Muslim ban part 2, which also blew up in his face because his own public statements were used by a judge against him.
The item that almost feels like Russia was designed to distract from it is Neil Gorsuch's confirmation hearing has continued. I'm assuming most of you know, but for those of you who don't, Gorsuch is Trump's pick to replace Scalia, and frankly, if you're a liberal or a human being, you don't want this guy in. The hearings are streaming online everywhere. You should be able to find them if they're still going on by the time you hear this. I recommend that you do simply so that you get words directly out of his own mouth as to what he thinks about various judicial issues. One of the other big things, of course, is the ACA's replacement, the AHCA, what we've already begun to call Trump Care, which is anything but care. There's a vote coming on that Thursday, which realistically, by the time you hear this episode, may have already gone on.
There is a chance that if the Republicans don't have the votes to pass it through the House, and it seems like it'll be dead on arrival in the Senate anyway, even if it does, but there is a chance that the House may extend the vote. If they extend the vote, we can pretty much kiss you goodbye. Paul Ryan's American Health Care Act, Trump Care, some people call it Ryan Care. I like to call it Trump Care because this is the thing that he promised he would do. So here it is, his very special. What was it? How did he describe it again? Oh yeah, something terrific.
Repeal and replace with something terrific.
So this is the Something Terrific Act we've been waiting for. And it is a flaming pile of dog shit. The CBO has reported that it is a pile of dog shit in so many words. The American Medical Association has reported it's a pile of dog shit. Association of Doctors. Basically anybody to do with healthcare thinks this is terrible. And hopefully it dies a swift death and we can get serious about universal healthcare. But, dare to dream.
On the state front, AJ, you mentioned when we were talking off mic that it turns out that there's a budget shortfall here in Iowa again. Is that what I recall?
Yeah, it looks like our governor's corporate tax cut strategy is apparently not working as well as it did for Ronald Reagan. This is from the Des Moines Register. A decline in the state's revenue forecast will force the Iowa legislature to plug a $131 million budget gap for the fiscal year that ends June 30th, which will likely require lawmakers to dip into cash reserve funds. So, you say tomato, I say Republican economics. When you run trickle down, you get trickled on. That's pretty much what happens. We don't raise enough revenue in the state. We try to cut programs, but it doesn't keep up. So basically, people get hurt, corporations get tax breaks, and Terry Branstad gets reelected.
And walks away. Again.
So like we said, there is a lot going on here, both in the state and around the country, that we wish we had time to get to. For me, it comes down to what I've told Luane privately, which is that I am really, really tired of people underestimating this bastard. And so every ray of sunlight we can put on this Russia scandal, which drags him closer and closer to the abyss that we can hopefully hurl him back into from whence he came, that to me is a service to the community, even if it means that we have to short shrift some of the other topics that we really wish that we could get to. But as we said, with these issues this week, part of the reasoning was, Chuck Schumer has basically already given me the line on Gorsuch, which is there's no way, as long as the FBI is investigating Trump, that we can put his pick on the Supreme Court. That's just asinine.
So we recognize that obviously we can't spend as much time as we'd like or go into as much detail as we would prefer with a variety of these things, which is part of the reason that we encourage not just our audience, but anyone really we encounter to devote the time to look into this stuff for yourself. You just have to. It can't just be a matter of waiting for some guy to tell you what you need to look at. You need to become involved in your local politics, your national politics, and pay attention to what's going on. Which actually brings me to something else. One of the sources I could actually recommend for you with regard to local politics to find out what's going on is friend of the show, Chantal Bach, who actually is responsible for sending the first email we've ever gotten. Luckily for us, it's complimentary. Had it not been, I'm sure I would have read it in its entirety just so that I could mock the individual who wrote it. But Chantal has been a follower of the show pretty much from the beginning, and she is deeply involved in local politics. And so if you think there's something that we're missing, you should probably check her out. You can probably find her on our Facebook and follow her there. Her particular focus right now is what's going on with the water systems here in Iowa, both Des Moines and West Des Moines, talking about dismantling the public works. She has more details than I do, but we wanted to give her a shout out, not only for being informed and for informing everyone else, but for being the first person to actually email us. Thanks, Chantal. So go follow her, see what's going on, and as always, organize, mobilize, protest, vote.